Hello, Eddy Clemons. As everyone knows, lifelong resident of the area. I've had a lot of connections and ties with both school systems in my lifetime. Still have a lot of feelings for the schools. I think the importance of schools is just absolutely incredible. The idea that's being worked on now with the consolidation, or as we said before, merger of school systems, was something I was instrumental in beginning talks on a few years ago. So I'm not here either for or against, and I'm not for debates, arguments, discussions. I had the opportunity to read a copy of the feasibility for consolidation of Covington City and Allegheny County school systems. A tremendous amount of good information in there. There's some things I would have liked to have seen a little bit more in depth, but there's lots of good information there. My first thing in asking is that our board, the other boards, the governing bodies, really put a lot of time into this and get to know what's in it. It's somewhat overwhelming. I'm pretty fortunate. I've seen a lot of it before. I've got a stack of some of the same kinds of numbers that have been provided in the past, but a lot of it is very difficult to understand. The public needs to be made aware of this, and not just that they can go get a copy, but my feelings are with this whole plan, it kind of needs to be broadcast to the public, the employees, everyone needs to buy into it. So I've gone through with some observations, and that's what I've done that I would just like to share, some food for thought, and everyone can look and make their own conclusions and grasp a lot out of there. But there's things that are real important numbers in there that starting with the beginning of it, when they do somewhat of an analysis of the whole thing, they're looking at, the student population. While Allegheny has lost 27%, I believe since 2013, Covington has increased 14%. Some of those numbers are related to each other, okay? There's some worrisome numbers out there too when you go to another page down the report, and something we should look at that like right now in a grade 12, Allegheny and Covington, there's 110 students difference. I think that was probably of last year. I'm not sure last year or current year. But if we go down to grade 3, there's 49, which is real scary when we talk about student growth, and for everyone who knows and for those who don't, funding is based on ADM. So it's a real important thing, the student growth is. So those numbers are all important when you see those downs and ups, and then you see those decreasing numbers in the other grades. There's substantial reduction in local funding as resources have gotten tough. We've seen, I think what they're using is maybe 8%, 8.5% reduction in local funding for the city. And in the city, because I know it best, if we go back a couple of more years, it's even more of a reduction. However, at that same time, we have increased. As you look at a huge increase and a decrease, then finances get tough. So, what is the answer for that? And I sincerely believe, even though in the beginning days it wasn't all about money, a lot of it is about what makes it affordable. And I understand that. But we have to look at a big picture of things and the students. It's all about the students and the education, and yes, it has to be financed. So, looking at all of that, when we look at the area we live in, we struggle financially. And resources have gotten tougher and tougher, and I understand that. I was in business for 38 years. I truly understand that. But as we look, some numbers that are quoted, the local participation that we are in, and I'm using round figures, is about 34%. The state average is 51%. So as our localities are getting stretched, our percentages are still lower than state averages considerably. And those numbers are hardly ever provided because that's not what's out there. But that is also related to a lot of unfair comparisons. We look at Fairfax County and Charlottesville and Richmond area. As we talk about SOL scores, it's hard to compete with those people as it is finances as well. So, there's a lot of variables into that it's hard to compare our entire area with the state. There are a lot of unique places out there, and a lot of these numbers, the fact of the SOL test and statements made about, we're not doing so well. Our schools have been accredited. That's what the state asked for. We have been accredited. We have lower scores in some areas, but you can't compete with some of those people. It's kind of like our football team with all the honors, and I'm proud of them, and they do great. We can't compete with a AAA team. Should we be compared with them? The high school league sees that we don't. However, the education people don't separate that. So it's tough when you go comparing. Let's compare apples and apples. We can see it in sports, but we can't see it in education. There's something wrong with that. And those numbers are reflected in here. But there are some of them that are broken down localities. And we should all be aware, you all, everyone, and not just the boards and the folks here. The people in the community need to be made aware of them. And they need to realize there's some things that are really bothersome about misconceptions and information out there. I know one of the strong points has been of this plan that we're not looking at a job loss. That's attrition and a variety of things. I did a lot of information and have a lot of information that before from studies. It's real tough to save money without jobs. And this very report, one of the first things I saw in one of the summaries was because of pupil-teacher ratios, 16 teachers could be cut as soon as we corrected that. And the first problem with that is it's hard to correct that problem. You can't always have that ideal. It depends on curriculums. But the first thing is, the first $1 million we save is by cutting 16 positions, and we're saying no jobs lost. We're also going to cut $900,000 from central office. The big thing in that is the principal salary is not, the superintendent's salary is not included in that. That's a state funded. So if we get rid of $100,000 plus superintendent, we've not saved any money. So there's $900,000 in savings that has to come from personnel, the majority of it, except the operation of this or another building. So there have to be several more positions. So as we're looking not to cost any positions, basically the first $2 million these people say you're saving is going to be 20 plus jobs. And that's where this report says that you're going to save money. So we need to look at that, or you all need to look at that. Everyone does. There's two big issues, and I was on the committee to begin with, but two of the big issues, equalizing payrolls and health insurance. The payrolls, they have worked relatively close, and I believe that. As there's statements been made about it being a lot closer than people imagine, when I looked, their average in here is that the city of Covington has an average of $5,000 per teacher hire. That's not all teachers do. There are a lot of comparisons made because there's two entirely different pay scales. So you can't compare those two people just looking at their pay scales. The county is different than the city. But they do have a number that says the average pay is $5,000 per year different. So that number equates to $500,000 in here needed to equalize salaries. Now what has been neglected, and basically in here they say work it out, as health care. So some years ago, the health care equalization was more money than what the salaries were, slightly. So there's still several $100,000 in equalizing health care, if that's set out to be done, that is basically left to be worked out. There's no solutions. It's kind of not mentioned, but there's another $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 potentially in health insurance to be equalized. That they're just saying, basically that you work it out. So, that's kind of a bothersome thing. But the public needs to be aware of these numbers. The staff, the employees. There's a lot of people that need to buy into this, and this report is great, but we don't need 20 or 30 people looking at it. The people that are looking at it need to understand it, and they need to understand a lot of it, but a lot of it needs to be in front of the employees and in front of the public. The community needs to know about these things to get a good buy-in. Looking at again the comparisons, it's real tough as our population has dwindled and our revenues have dwindled, and there are a lot of things, tool tax that's hanging over our head. The West Rock, with their new expansion a few years ago, actually had an adverse effect because it increased real estate values and things that you know, changes the amount of money we get slightly. There's a lot of factors into it that most people just aren't aware of, and they should be, at least the opportunity. So if you're losing money, this is why. The effects that one thing has on another in a community. We're a small town, and you can go to Hardee's or McDonald's and hear all kinds of stories going on, and they don't have a clue. But as we look at the state of our country and the state of our state today, a lot of the havoc has to do with uninformed people and people who don't want to get involved. As we look at our guns being the big issue now, if all the people who got together and came to meetings to have sanctuary gun cities had gone to vote, maybe that wouldn't have happened. Or because of populated areas, maybe we couldn't have changed it anyway. But our communities, the Allegheny Highlands, and I think I am unique. I grew up in the county. I went to the county schools. I moved to the city, my kids in city schools, and I was on the school board for 9 years. I own property in the city and the county both. Any tax changes are going to affect me. But I try not to look at it that way. I want the best for the community. I want the best for both of our school systems, our kids. And our beginning days on this discussion several years ago had to do with adding curriculums and what we could do to make things better for the kids. As we add curriculums, adding curriculums usually mean more teachers, more class time. Here we're talking about cutting teachers. I've shared before, and I've been not allowed to speak about it, but I did a lot of research when we were going through this before. And as I hear today about there's lots of school systems successfully done this, I don't think there's a lot of systems that have done it. From what my research says, there are very few. At the time of a few years ago, there were 3 in Virginia, I believe, maybe 4 at the most. But there was a gentleman from Pennsylvania who was kind of the expert on it. He was going out of the state helping folks. And his first thing was, don't do it to save money. You're doing it to help the kids. If you're going to do more and better things for the kids, it's going to cost you more money. So, as we look at the community and we look at the tax revenues, if we're going to lose 20 or 25 jobs, we could have 20 or 25 families that have to move away. We could have, just say 2 kids a family, we could lose 40 kids. We just lost $200,000 in ADM money because those families moved away. Now, we're not talking real estate taxes, we're not talking about sales tax, we're not talking about supporting local businesses. But if we just force that, and we want to talk about having opportunities for our kids. We want to provide an education and give them a reason to stay here. The education is not the reason they're going to stay here. It's the jobs. I think our school systems, both of them, have done an incredible job. I can tell you about doctors and lawyers and scientists, because I have a son that's going there, that have come out of these schools. And we've provided a great education for them. But the high percentage of those people had to move away for jobs. And the twofold thing is, our kids go away, but they're not buying a house here, they're not paying real estate taxes, they're not paying sales tax, and they're doing none of those things here. So let's not blame those things on the education system. And to say that we don't have a school system good enough for a business to come here is garbage. I spent time on the chamber board. I talked to businesses. The problem with businesses coming here a whole lot is a lack of workforce, because so many people have moved away. That we don't have money, we don't have people to support businesses. Recent businesses that have come to look at Covington, we don't have the people, the population to support them, so it's kind of a vicious circle. But let's not blame it on a lack of education. We're giving our kids a good enough education that they can move to a Charleston, West Virginia, where my son is, and get a great job. And lots of other folks here are having kids that have had to move away. Melinda has kids out of town to get the jobs they have. So I don't like beating up our education system. It's why we don't have jobs here and why kids have to leave. And we can always improve on it, and opportunities out there are great. But you know, when I look at this whole feasibility for consolidation, I didn't see any of that. It's all about the finances, and that's probably what was asked for. But it's not the likelihood on how can we make a better school system having two. It's how can we afford to do it. And a big portion of it is cutting jobs and cutting teachers. So, you know, I just ask that all of you all, and everyone you all can communicate with, please spend some time with this. There's a lot of very good information in here, and a lot of complex information in here. And there's a lot that both of our school boards and our governing bodies should sit down and read, because they don't always quote what this says. So they need to get the facts too, because apparently we've paid some people some big money to get the right facts. So we hope they're correct. And we've had a lot of these same facts. Again, I have some of these things from a year or two ago in folders. The state provides a lot of it. So there are a lot of numbers here that are really important to this plan moving forward. I just think that a lot of people need to be informed about what they are. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.